The second heartbeat never came. Tavish Caulfield stood at the altar, alpha blood singing in his veins, waiting for the bond that should have slammed into him like lightning the moment he laid eyes on his intended. Instead, nothing. Just the hollow thud of his own pulse and the growing certainty that everything about this union was wrong. The woman before him was beautiful, perfect, even. She answered every question correctly, smiled at precisely the right moments. And she was absolutely not his mate. Welcome to a story about one alpha's choice to trust his instincts over centuries of tradition and the chaos that followed. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below, hit that like button, and stay until the end to see how one moment of truth can shatter an entire system. The Great Hall of the Covenant smelled like old cedar and new anxiety. Tavish had been standing in various ceremonial positions for the better part of 3 hours, and his dress boots, hand-tooled leather that cost more than most families earned in a month, were starting to pinch. He shifted his weight slightly, careful not to let the movement show. Alphas didn't fidget. Alphas didn't show discomfort. Alphas certainly didn't question the wisdom of territorial alliances that had taken 2 years to negotiate. But Tavish was questioning everything. The final readings will commence at sunset, Elder Morvain announced, his voice carrying across the vaulted chamber with the kind of authority that came from 5 decades of mediating border disputes. The sacred texts confirm compatibility. The territorial agreements stand ratified. All that remains is the formal bonding ceremony. Tavish nodded, the gesture automatic. He'd been nodding for 3 days straight, nodding at diplomats, nodding at his own council, nodding at the endless parade of well-wishers who seemed more invested in this union than he was. His gaze drifted to the woman seated 12 feet away in the bride's chair, a ridiculous piece of furniture that looked like someone had carved a throne out of a wedding cake. Lisette Rouvain, his intended. The daughter of the Eastern Reach's most powerful family, bred and trained for exactly this kind of alliance. She was looking at her hands. She'd been looking at her hands a lot over the past 3 days. "Beautiful ceremony so far," Marcus said quietly from his position just behind Tavish's left shoulder. His second-in-command had perfected the art of the ventriloquist's whisper, talking without moving his lips, a skill invaluable during tedious political functions. "It's not a ceremony yet," Tavish murmured back. "It's a dress rehearsal for a ceremony." "You're stalling." "I'm observing protocol." "You hate protocol." Tavish didn't argue because Marcus was right. He'd spent the better part of his 32 years avoiding protocol wherever possible, preferring to lead by action rather than tradition. But this wasn't about him. This was about the alliance, about finally ending the border skirmishes that had cost 43 lives in the past 18 months, about giving both territories something they desperately needed, stability. And if that required marrying a woman he'd never met until 4 days ago, then that's what he'd do. The problem was the bond, or rather, the absence of it. Tavish had been raised on stories of the bonding, that instant, undeniable connection between true mates that hit like a freight train and left no room for doubt. His parents had bonded at first sight across a crowded marketplace. His sister had bonded with her mate during a council meeting, the force of it so strong she'd actually knocked over a table standing up. Every bonded pair he'd ever known described it the same way: sudden, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. A second heartbeat. That's how his mother always phrased it. "You'll know when you meet them, Tavish. You'll hear their heartbeat as clearly as your own, and you'll wonder how you ever lived without that rhythm." He'd been in the same room as Lisette Rouvain for approximately 72 hours. He'd heard nothing. "The evening meal will be served in the Western Gallery," Elder Morvain continued, consulting a schedule that seemed to require 3 assistants and a leather-bound ledger the size of a small child, followed by the traditional exchange of gifts, the reading of lineages, and the private audience for final consent. Tavish watched Lisette's shoulders tense at the mention of the private audience. It was a subtle movement, quickly controlled, but he'd spent the past 3 days cataloging her reactions, trying to understand the woman he was about to bind himself to for life. She was terrified. That much was obvious. What wasn't obvious was why. Political marriages were common enough in their world. Uncomfortable often, but not usually frightening. Lisette had been raised for this kind of alliance. The reports his scouts had brought back described her as intelligent, composed, educated in 5 languages, and skilled in 3 forms of negotiation. A woman who'd sat through border disputes since she was 16 and never flinched. This woman flinched at everything. "Stand for the blessing of intention," Elder Morvain intoned. Tavish stood. Across the chamber, Lizette stood as well, her movements precise and mechanical. She was tall, taller than he'd expected from the descriptions. Her hair was the color of dark honey, pulled back in an elaborate style that probably required an engineering degree to construct. Her dress was midnight blue, cut in the formal style of the Eastern Reaches, high-necked and long-sleeved despite the warmth of the hall. He'd seen exactly 3 inches of her actual skin in 3 days, her face and her hands. Both were beautiful. Both were also trembling. Elder Morvain began the blessing in the old tongue, words that flowed like water over stones, ancient and smooth and utterly meaningless to Tavish's modern ear. He knew enough of the language to catch the gist: protection, prosperity, fertility, the usual requests when joining 2 bloodlines. His attention wandered. The hall was packed, easily 300 people, maybe more, all dressed in their finest, all watching with the kind of hungry anticipation that made Tavish's skin crawl. They weren't here for him. They weren't even really here for Lizette. They were here for the spectacle, for the historic moment when the Western Territory and the Eastern Reaches finally buried decades of suspicion and bloodshed. No pressure. "You look like you're about to bolt," Marcus whispered. "Can't. Locked all the exits." "Smart man. That's why you're my second." The blessing ended. Elder Morvain gestured them forward for the exchange of recognition, a ritual where the intended couple was supposed to approach each other, join hands, and speak their names. Tavish stepped down from the platform. His boots echoed on the stone floor, each step feeling heavier than the last. Lizette descended from her ridiculous throne chair with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield. They met in the center of the hall, exactly where centuries of couples had met before them, standing on a mosaic that depicted 2 wolves intertwined, the symbol of eternal bonding. Up close, he could see the details the distance had hidden. She had light eyes, gray or perhaps pale blue. It was hard to tell in the candlelight. Her skin was flawless, almost porcelain, without a single scar or mark. Her hands, when she extended them, were soft and trembling. Tavish took them gently. No spark, no second heartbeat. Nothing. Just the disturbing sensation of holding someone else's hands while 300 people watched and waited for magic that refused to appear. "Tavish Caulfield," he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "Alpha of the Western Territory, son of Brennan and Morna, sworn to protect and serve." She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The silence stretched. Someone in the back of the hall coughed. "Lizette," she finally whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Lizette Rouvain, daughter of the Eastern Reaches." That was it. No titles, no lineage, no formal declaration. Elder Morvain frowned slightly, but recovered quickly. "The recognition is acknowledged. The bond will be tested at sunset." They released hands and stepped back. The crowd murmured approval, but Tavish caught the undercurrent of confusion. This wasn't how these things usually went. There should have been more. More warmth, more connection, more something. There had been nothing. The Western Gallery was a masterpiece of architecture designed to intimidate. 30-foot ceilings, walls lined with the mounted heads of animals that had been extinct for 200 years, and a table that could seat 60 people comfortably. Tonight, it seated 24. Tavish found himself positioned at the head of the table, with Lizette to his right and Elder Morvain to his left. Marcus sat 3 seats down, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough away to maintain protocol. The meal was elaborate, 7 courses, each more complicated than the last, each requiring a different fork from the bewildering array of silverware surrounding each plate. Tavish grabbed what looked right and hoped for the best. Lizette picked at her food like a bird trying to decide if something was poisonous. "The quail is excellent," Tavish offered, making conversation because someone had to. "Our cook swore she'd quit if I didn't compliment it specifically." Lizette glanced at him, then at her plate, then back at her hands. "It's very nice." Her voice was different from the hall, softer, with less of the formal edge. Almost uncertain. "You don't have to eat it if you don't like it," he said quietly. "I can have something else brought out." "Preference?" She shook her head quickly. This is fine. Thank you. Across the table, Lord Garrett, one of the Eastern Reach's primary negotiators, launched into a story about the time he'd mediated a dispute between two farming families over a property line that turned out to have been drawn incorrectly 70 years ago. It was meant to be amusing. It wasn't. Tavish made appropriate listening noises while studying Lizette from the corner of his eye. She was present but not engaged. She nodded at the right moments, made small sounds of agreement when expected, but never actually contributed to the conversation. For someone supposedly skilled in negotiation, she showed remarkably little interest in the dozen political conversations happening around the table. Your journey here was pleasant, I hope? Tavish tried again during a lull in Garrett's monologue. Yes, fine. The mountain pass can be rough this time of year. It was manageable, but it was like trying to have a conversation with a particularly polite statue. Lizette has always been reserved, Lady Moraine offered from 6 seats down, clearly trying to help, thoughtful before speaking, a valuable trait in negotiations. Tavish nodded politely, but something about the statement bothered him. The reports hadn't described Lizette as reserved. They'd described her as sharp, quick-witted, someone who could take apart a bad argument in 3 sentences and make the speaker thank her for it. This woman couldn't seem to string 3 sentences together. I understand you speak 5 languages? He asked. She blinked at him. Yes, some. Which ones? The common ones. Could you be more specific? She looked genuinely panicked. The usual ones. For the region. That wasn't an answer. That was evasion. Marcus caught his eye from down the table and raised one eyebrow fractionally. You seeing this? Tavish gave the smallest nod. Yeah, I'm seeing it. The meal continued for another 90 minutes. Dishes came and went. Conversations rose and fell. Toasts were made to peace, prosperity, and the bright future ahead. Through it all, Lizette sat silent and small, picking at food she didn't eat, contributing nothing. When dessert finally arrived, some architectural marvel involving spun sugar and edible flowers, Tavish leaned closer and kept his voice low. Are you all right? She startled badly enough that her spoon clattered against her plate. Yes. Of course, why wouldn't I be? You seem uncomfortable. I'm fine. If there's something wrong, there isn't. Her voice had an edge now, sharp and defensive. Everything is fine. This is all exactly as it should be. The statement felt like a script, like something she'd been told to say. Tavish sat back and let it go, but the unease in his gut was growing into something darker. Something was very wrong here. The private audience took place in a smaller chamber off the main hall, smaller being relative when the room still had 15-foot ceilings and could comfortably hold 30 people. It held 2. Tavish stood by the window, looking out over the grounds where the bonding ceremony would take place tomorrow at sunset. The sacred grove was already being prepared. Candles, flowers, the ceremonial markers that would guide the ritual. Behind him, Lizette stood near the door like she was calculating escape routes. We don't have to do this, Tavish said without turning around. Silence. The private audience, he clarified. It's tradition, but tradition isn't law. If you'd prefer to skip it, no. Her voice was tight. We should. It's expected. Tavish turned to face her. In the softer light of the chamber, she looked younger than her reported 26 years. Fragile almost. What do you want, Lizette? The question seemed to confuse her. I want what's expected. The alliance. Peace. That's what everyone else wants. What do you want? She stared at him like he'd asked her to solve a complex mathematical equation in her head. I don't understand the question. It's not complicated. Do you want this marriage? This bond? Me? It doesn't matter what I want. It matters to me. That seemed to throw her completely. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked around like someone might materialize with the correct answer. The reports about you, Tavish said carefully, described someone very different from the woman I've met. Her whole body went rigid. What did they say? That you were intelligent, sharp, someone who could hold their own in any negotiation. And I'm not? Defensive again, that edge creeping back into her voice. I don't know. You haven't said enough for me to tell. She flinched. Tavish crossed the room slowly, stopping several feet away to avoid crowding her. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to understand, because something here doesn't add up, and tomorrow we're supposed to bind ourselves together for life, and I'd really like to know what I'm walking into. The Alliance? Damn the Alliance. The words came out harder than he intended, and he took a breath to soften his tone. I mean, yes, the Alliance matters. Peace matters. But I'm not marrying a treaty. I'm marrying a person, and I don't know anything about that person. Lizette's hands were shaking again. She clasped them together, trying to hide it. Tell me one true thing, Tavish said quietly. Just one. Something real. I can't. Why not? Because it's not. She stopped, swallowed hard. Because this has to work. Too much depends on it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. They stood in silence, 3 feet apart and 1,000 miles distant. The bond, Tavish said finally. You feel it, don't you? Or rather, you don't feel it either. Her eyes went wide. I'm not criticizing, he continued. I'm just stating a fact. I was told there would be a bond, an instant connection, a second heartbeat. And there's nothing, is there? She looked like she might cry, or run, or both. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Tavish, one true thing, Lisette. That's all I'm asking. Just one true thing before we go through with this. She met his eyes for the first time all evening. Really met them. Not just a glancing look before focusing on something safer. What he saw there was pure terror. I can't, she whispered. I'm sorry. I can't. And she fled. Actually turned and fled from the room, her formal dress rustling, her careful composure shattering. Tavish stood alone in the chamber, staring at the door she'd disappeared through, and knew with absolute certainty that tomorrow's ceremony was going to be a disaster. She ran out of the private audience. Marcus looked up from the tactical maps he'd been studying, one eyebrow raised. Ran? Like quickly walked with purpose? Or actual running? Actual running. Tavish poured himself a drink from the cabinet in his private study, one of the few places in this entire complex where he could actually be alone. Like I'd threatened to eat her. Did you threaten to eat her? Marcus. Just checking. You can be intense. Tavish drained half the glass and grimaced. The whiskey was older than he was and tasted like smoke and regret. I asked her to tell me one true thing, one honest statement about herself or this situation. She panicked and ran. Marcus set down his maps, attention fully focused now. That's not normal bride behavior. No, it's not. Even for a political marriage. Even for that. So what are you thinking? Tavish moved to the window. His study overlooked the eastern gardens, dark now except for the torches marking the paths. In the distance, he could see lights in the guest quarters where Lisette and her delegation were housed. I'm thinking, he said slowly, that the woman I've been talking to for 3 days is not the woman described in any of the intelligence reports. People can be different in person than on paper. Not this different. The reports described Lisette Rouvain as confident, educated, politically astute, someone who's been managing border negotiations since she was a teenager. And instead you got someone who can barely maintain eye contact, who can't answer basic questions about herself, who physically trembles every time someone addresses her directly. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You think it's fear of the bonding? Maybe. But fear of what? The ceremony is voluntary. She agreed to this. Her family negotiated for it. Doesn't mean she wanted it. No, Tavish agreed. But it doesn't explain the inconsistencies. The language question, for instance. What about it? I asked which 5 languages she spoke. She couldn't name them, said the common ones and the usual ones for the region, and got increasingly nervous when I pressed. Marcus frowned. Could be stage fright. For 3 days straight? Could be you're intimidating as hell. She's supposed to be skilled at negotiating with intimidating people. That's the whole point of this alliance, bringing someone with diplomatic experience to help bridge our territories. So what's your theory? Tavish took another drink, letting the whiskey burn down his throat while he organized his thoughts. I think something is wrong. I think the person we're calling Lizette Rouvain is either lying about who she is, or she's been fundamentally misrepresented. Or you're looking for problems because you don't want to go through with this. The statement hit harder than it should have. Tavish turned from the window. You think I'm self-sabotaging? Marcus shrugged. I think you've avoided commitment your entire adult life. I think you've watched your sister build a perfect bond with her mate, and you've internalized that as the only acceptable standard. And I think you're facing a political marriage with no romantic foundation, and it's freaking you out. That's a lot of psychology for 11 at night. Am I wrong? Tavish wanted to say yes, wanted to dismiss it as Marcus overthinking, but his second-in-command had known him for 15 years and had an annoying habit of being right about this kind of thing. The bond, he said instead. You've seen bonded pairs. The moment they meet, there's something, a recognition, an inevitability. Sure. I've been in the same room as this woman for 3 days. I've held her hands, looked her in the eyes, and I've felt nothing. Maybe the bond isn't instant for everyone. Everyone says it is. Everyone also said the Eastern Reaches would never agree to this alliance, and here we are. Tavish drained the rest of his glass and set it down harder than necessary. Tomorrow at sunset, I'm supposed to bind myself for life to a woman I don't know, don't understand, and don't feel any connection to. And you're telling me I should just trust the process? I'm telling you to be careful before you blow up 2 years of negotiations based on a feeling. It's not a feeling, it's an absence of feeling. That's the problem. Marcus stood, collecting his maps. Sleep on it. Maybe things will be clearer in the morning. And if they're not? His second-in-command paused at the door. Then you're going to have to decide what matters more, your instincts or the peace treaty. After Marcus left, Tavish stood alone in his study, watching the distant lights of the guest quarters and wondering what the woman there was doing. Was she sleeping, pacing, crying? Did she feel the same wrongness he did? Or was Marcus right? Was he just a commitment-phobic alpha looking for excuses to avoid an uncomfortable duty? His mother's words echoed in his head. You'll hear their heartbeat as clearly as your own, and you'll wonder how you ever lived without that rhythm. He heard nothing but his own pulse and the quiet tick of the clock on the mantel. Tomorrow at sunset, he would stand in that sacred grove and either bind himself to a stranger or destroy an alliance that could save hundreds of lives. No pressure at all. Morning brought rain, not the gentle romantic kind that poets wrote about, but the cold, relentless sort that turned the grounds into mud and made everyone's mood worse. Tavish stood in the covered walkway between the main hall and the guest quarters, watching water cascade off the eaves, and tried to shake the headache that had settled behind his eyes sometime around 3 in the morning. The ceremony will proceed regardless of weather, Elder Morvain announced, appearing at his elbow like a particularly persistent ghost. The sacred grove has shelter. Wonderful. You seem troubled. I'm fine. The private audience was private, Tavish cut in, more sharply than intended. As the name suggests, Elder Morvain had been managing important ceremonies for longer than Tavish had been alive, and he'd developed a look that communicated disappointment, concern, and judgment all at once. He deployed that look now. The bonding, he said carefully, is not merely a personal matter. It represents, I know what it represents. Then you understand that doubts at this stage. I said, I'm fine. Tavish softened his tone with effort. The ceremony will proceed. I just need some air. In the rain, especially in the rain. He left before Elder Morvain could offer more wisdom he didn't want. The grounds were deserted, everyone sensible taking shelter from the downpour. Tavish walked anyway, letting the rain soak through his jacket because at least it was honest. Rain didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Rain didn't smile and nod while hiding fundamental truths. Rain just fell. He found himself at the edge of the sacred grove without consciously heading there. The space was beautiful even in the storm, ancient trees forming a natural cathedral, stone markers worn smooth by centuries of ceremonies. Tomorrow night, he would stand in the center of this grove and bind himself to Lizette Rouvain, unless he didn't. You'll catch your death. Tavish turned to find his sister, Kenna, standing under an umbrella that was losing its battle against the wind. Since when do you worry about me catching colds? He asked. Since you started acting like an idiot. She moved closer, offering half the umbrella's questionable shelter. Marcus told me about last night. Marcus talks too much. Marcus cares about you. So do I, which is why I'm asking, what are you doing? Standing in the rain, apparently. Tavish, he sighed. Kenna had perfected the art of the one-word reprimand. I don't know, trying to figure out if I'm making the right choice. By drowning yourself? It's a process. She was quiet for a moment, both of them watching rain hammer the sacred grove. Kenna had bonded with her mate 3 years ago, and sometimes Tavish caught her rubbing her left wrist absently, the spot where she'd gotten a tattoo of his heartbeat pattern. That's what the bond was supposed to feel like. A second pulse. An extension of yourself. Tell me, Kenna said finally, about the bond, or the lack of it. There's nothing to tell. That's the problem. You feel nothing when you're with her? Nothing beyond general awkwardness and growing certainty that something is deeply wrong. Have you considered that maybe you're the problem? He looked at her sharply. Excuse me? You're terrified of commitment, Tavish. You always have been. And now you're facing a permanent bond, and maybe your fear is making you find problems that aren't there. You sound like Marcus. Marcus is smart. So what if there's no instant fireworks? Maybe your bond takes time. Maybe it builds instead of explodes. And maybe, Tavish said quietly, I'm supposed to trust my instincts when they're screaming that everything about this is wrong. Kenna studied him for a long moment. What are you going to do? I don't know. The ceremony is in 8 hours. I know. If you're going to back out, you need to do it soon. Give them time to adjust. I know that too. She squeezed his arm. Whatever you decide, I support you. But decide, Tavish. Don't just let it happen. She left him standing in the rain, words echoing in his head. Decide. Don't just let it happen. He stood there for another 10 minutes, getting thoroughly soaked, and still had no idea what he was going to do. By noon, the rain had stopped, but the damage was done. The sacred grove looked less like a mystical bonding site and more like a swamp with decorative candles. Tavish watched 3 servants attempt to move a ceremonial brazier that had sunk 4 inches into the mud and tried to find some humor in the situation. He failed. The ground will dry by sunset, Elder Morvain assured him for the 3rd time in as many hours. The ceremony will proceed as planned. Of course it will, Tavish said, because what else could he say? Actually, I'm considering calling off the entire thing because my gut says we're about to make a catastrophic mistake. That would go over well. Marcus appeared at his elbow, looking grim. We have a problem. Just one? Lord Garrett is asking for you. Says it's urgent regarding the final negotiations. Tavish's headache intensified. What final negotiations? Everything was settled 2 days ago. Apparently not everything. They found Lord Garrett in the treaty room, another absurdly named space that existed solely for political posturing. The man was pacing, which immediately set off alarms. Garrett never paced. Garrett was the kind of negotiator who could sit motionless for 6 hours while wearing down his opposition through sheer patience. We have a complication, Garrett announced without preamble. So I hear. The Timber Rights Clause, Section 7, Subsection 3. Tavish fought the urge to throw something. That clause was finalized last month. Your council signed off on the version granting shared access. Our records show exclusive Eastern rights for the first 5 years. That's not what we agreed to. Then we have a discrepancy that needs resolution before the bonding proceeds. It was a power play. Had to be. Garrett was too meticulous to have genuine confusion about something this fundamental. But why now? Why 4 hours before the ceremony? Lord Garrett, Tavish said carefully, are you trying to renegotiate terms? I'm trying to clarify what was agreed upon. By introducing a completely different version of the clause? By ensuring we're all operating from the same understanding. Marcus moved slightly closer to Tavish's side, a protective gesture disguised as casual repositioning. This seems like something that could wait until after the ceremony. On the contrary, Garrett said smoothly, this seems like exactly the kind of thing that should be resolved before we formalize a permanent alliance. The implicit threat was clear. Fix this to our satisfaction, or there might not be a ceremony. Tavish took a slow breath and mentally ran through his options. He could call Garrett's bluff, insist the original terms stood, and risk the entire alliance. He could cave, accept the modified clause, and set a precedent that the Eastern Reaches could rewrite agreements on a whim. Or he could play the game, negotiate, stall, find a compromise that gave both sides something while giving neither everything. He was so tired of playing games. "We'll review both versions," he said finally, line by line, right now. Garrett smiled thinly. "Of course." 2 hours later, Tavish wanted to strangle someone, possibly everyone. The timber rights clause had expanded into discussions about water access, which had somehow triggered debates about trading routes, which had spiraled into arguments about tariff structures that had nothing to do with anything originally agreed upon. Garrett was systematically picking apart the treaty, one clause at a time. "This is bullshit," Marcus muttered during a brief recess while Garrett consulted with his own advisors. "He's stalling. Obviously. Why? That's the question." Tavish rubbed his temples, headache now a constant throb. Either he wants better terms, or he wants to delay the ceremony. Or he wants you to lose your temper and say something that gives them an excuse to walk away. Tavish looked at his second sharply. "You think they want out?" "I think something's wrong on their side, and they're trying to figure out how to handle it without looking like they're backing out." Before Tavish could respond, Elder Morvain appeared in the doorway, looking more frazzled than Tavish had ever seen him. "The bride," he said tersely, "is requesting to see you." "Now?" "Immediately. She says it's urgent." Tavish exchanged glances with Marcus. "Did she say what about?" "She didn't say much of anything, just that she needed to speak with you before the ceremony. Alone." That last word hung in the air, loaded with implications. "Tell Lord Garrett I'll return in 15 minutes, Tavish said, standing. "We're not done here." "Make it 10, Marcus suggested quietly. "Don't give him time to invent new problems." Lizette was waiting in the same small chamber where they'd had their disastrous private audience the night before. She stood by the window, back to the door, shoulders rigid. "You wanted to see me," Tavish said, closing the door behind him. She didn't turn around. "I need to tell you something." "All right." Silence stretched. Outside, servants were still working on the grove, their voices drifting through the open window. "Lizette? I can't do this," she said finally, voice barely audible. Tavish's heart did something complicated. Relief? Vindication? Concern? All three tangled together. "The ceremony? Any of it. I can't. I'm not." She stopped, took a shaking breath. "I'm not who you think I am." There it was, the confirmation he'd been waiting for. "Then who are you?" he asked gently. She turned and her face was streaked with tears. Not delicate, pretty crying, messy, desperate crying. "I'm trying to tell you, but I can't, because if I do, everything falls apart. The alliance, the peace, all of it." "Try me. You don't understand what's at stake. Then explain it." She laughed, a broken sound. "I can't. That's the problem. I've been told exactly what to say, how to act, what to reveal, and what to hide. And I've been terrible at all of it. And you've noticed. And now everything is falling apart anyway." Tavish moved closer, slowly. "What have you been told to hide?" "I can't." "One true thing, Lizette. That's all. Just one." "Stop calling me that." The outburst shocked them both. She clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide with horror at her own words. Tavish went very still. "What did you just say?" "Nothing. I didn't." "Stop calling you Lizette," he repeated slowly. "Why would I stop calling you by your name unless it's not your name?" She was shaking her head, backing away. "Forget I said anything, please. I shouldn't have asked to see you. This was a mistake." "Who are you?" "I'm no one. Nobody important. I'm just—" "Who are you?" He didn't raise his voice, but the command was clear. She crumpled, actually collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, dress pooling around her. "I'm her sister, her twin. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The world tilted sideways. Tavish stared at the woman on the floor, not Lizette Rouvain, but her twin sister, whose name he didn't even know, and felt several things click into place with sickening clarity. the inconsistencies, the fear, the complete mismatch between reports and reality. Where is she? His voice came out rough. Where's the real Lizette? I don't know. I know she's here on the grounds, but I don't know exactly where. She didn't want this. Any of this. The marriage, the alliance, the political maneuvering. So we switched. We thought, you thought you could fool an entire delegation for 3 days and somehow make it through a bonding ceremony? When you say it like that, it sounds insane. That's because it is insane. She flinched at his volume, and he forced himself to take a breath. Getting angry at her wouldn't help. She was clearly as much a victim of this scheme as he was. Does anyone else know? He asked more quietly. Our family? The people who helped us. But not your delegation. Not the elders, not... She stopped. Lord Garrett knows. That's why he's stalling. He figured it out this morning. He told me if I didn't tell you before the ceremony, he would. Generous of him. He's trying to protect the alliance. If this comes out during the ceremony, it destroys everything. Tavish laughed, a harsh sound. And you think telling me 4 hours before solves the problem? I think it gives you a choice. You can go through with it anyway. No one else has to know. Lizette and I are identical. The bond might not be instant, but it could develop over time, and the alliance would still... Absolutely not. She looked up at him, hopeless. Then what? Then we find your sister and figure out what the hell we're actually dealing with here. You can't. If she wanted to be found, she would have shown herself by now. I'm an alpha with 300 people at my disposal. I can find one runaway bride. She's not... The woman stopped, seemed to reconsider. She's scared. If you hunt her down with a pack of trackers, she'll run farther. Then what do you suggest? She was quiet for a moment, thinking. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. Let me find her. She'll listen to me. She trusts me. You lied to her about this entire scheme. Why would she trust you? The hit landed. Her face crumpled again. Because I'm all she has. Our mother is dead. Our father cares more about politics than people. I'm the only one who's ever protected her, and I thought I was protecting her now, but I just made everything worse. Tavish wanted to stay angry, wanted to rage at the deception, the manipulation, the sheer stupidity of thinking this could ever work. But looking at this woman, whose name he still didn't know, he saw nothing but exhaustion and genuine regret. What's your name? He asked. Catherine. Kate. All right, Kate. You have until sunset to find your sister and bring her to me, privately. No guards, no witnesses. Just her, you, and me. And if I can't, then I'm calling off the ceremony and exposing this whole mess, and let the political consequences fall where they may. Her face went pale. That will destroy the alliance. Your sister already destroyed the alliance when she ran. I'm just deciding whether to clean up the mess quietly or publicly. Kate stood slowly, using the wall for support. Where should I bring her? The Sacred Grove, 2 hours before sunset. That gives us time to talk before everyone expects us there for the ceremony. What if she won't come? Convince her. Because if I have to hunt her down, I promise this conversation will go much worse. She nodded and fled, again, leaving Tavish alone with the wreckage of an alliance that had never had a chance. He stood there for exactly 30 seconds, letting himself process the rage and betrayal and sheer absurdity of the situation. Then he went to find Marcus. Marcus took the news better than expected, which meant he swore extensively but quietly, so as not to alert anyone outside the room. A twin sister, he said when the swearing ran out. They sent you a twin sister. Apparently. And no one noticed. I noticed. I just didn't realize what I was noticing. Marcus paced the length of Tavish's study twice. Okay. So the woman we've been calling Lizette is actually Catherine. The real Lizette is hiding somewhere on the grounds. Lord Garrett knows and is using it to leverage better treaty terms. And we have, he checked his watch, 4 hours until a ceremony that can't possibly happen. That about covers it. What are you going to do? Catherine is finding her sister. They'll meet me at the Grove in 2 hours. And then? And then I talk to the actual woman I'm supposed to bond with and find out what the hell she wants. What if she doesn't want the alliance? Then we're done here. Marcus stopped pacing. Tavish, think about this. 2 years of negotiations. 43 dead from border conflicts. This alliance could save hundreds of lives. I know that. So maybe we find a way to make it work anyway. Catherine seems willing. You could proceed with her. No one else has to know. No. You're not even considering it? There's nothing to consider. I'm not bonding with someone who isn't my mate based on a lie. Tavish met his second's eyes. Would you? Marcus looked away first. No, I wouldn't. Then we find another way. We talk to the real Lizette. We see if there's any chance of salvaging this. And if there's not, he didn't finish the sentence. If there's not, we're back to border conflicts and deaths and everything we've been trying to prevent. I know. Your council will be furious. Let them be furious. The elders will demand explanations. They'll get them. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're sure about this? I'm sure I can't marry the wrong woman and hope it works out. Beyond that? Tavish shrugged. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's comforting, isn't it? The next hour crawled past like torture. Tavish tried to focus on the ongoing negotiations with Lord Garrett, but his mind kept wandering to the sacred grove, to the real Lizette hiding somewhere on the grounds, to the disaster unfolding in slow motion. Garrett seemed to sense his distraction and pressed harder, introducing new concerns about grain distribution and seasonal trading windows. Enough, Tavish said finally, cutting off Garrett mid-sentence. We both know what you're doing. Garrett raised an eyebrow. And what am I doing? Stalling? Renegotiating? Trying to leverage your knowledge of the twin situation into better terms? A flicker of surprise crossed Garrett's face before his mask slammed back in place. I don't know what you're talking about. Catherine told me. Everything. The silence that followed was profound. I see, Garrett said finally. So let's stop playing games. You want something. What is it? Garrett studied him for a long moment. I want the alliance to succeed. By blackmailing me? By ensuring you understand the stakes. If the truth about the twins emerges publicly, it humiliates both our territories. Your council loses faith in the Eastern Reach's honesty. Our council loses faith in the Rouvain family's ability to deliver on agreements. The alliance collapses, and we're back to skirmishes within a month. So you thought threatening to expose it unless I accepted worse terms was the solution? I thought giving you an incentive to proceed despite the deception was pragmatic. Tavish leaned back in his chair. Here's what's going to happen instead. I'm meeting with the real Lizette in an hour. We're going to have a conversation about what she actually wants. Based on that conversation, I'll decide whether the alliance can proceed. And if she doesn't want it, then we find another way forward, but not built on lies. Garrett's expression hardened. You're willing to throw away 2 years of work over principle? I'm willing to insist on truth as a foundation for partnership. If that's too much to ask, then we never had a real alliance to begin with. The council won't see it that way. Then the council can negotiate the next peace treaty themselves. Garrett stood slowly. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it'll be an honest one. After Garrett left, Tavish sat alone in the treaty room and wondered if he was, in fact, making a catastrophic mistake. Marcus was right. The alliance could save lives. Real, quantifiable lives. Was his pride worth more than that? But it wasn't pride. It was the bone-deep certainty that a bond built on deception would crumble eventually, and when it did, the damage would be far worse than anything they faced now. He had to believe that truth mattered more than convenience. Had to. With an hour left until the meeting, Tavish walked the grounds alone. He avoided the sacred grove, didn't want to crowd the space before Kate brought her sister, and instead found himself wandering the eastern gardens. The rain had left everything gleaming and fresh. Droplets clung to leaves, caught the afternoon light, turned ordinary shrubs into something almost beautiful. He wondered what the real Lizette was doing right now. Was she scared, relieved that the truth was out, planning her next escape? What kind of person ran from their own bonding ceremony? Someone desperate, probably. Someone who felt trapped. He could understand that. His feet carried him farther into the gardens, past the formal beds, and into the wilder sections where native plants were allowed to grow without interference. It was quieter here, peaceful in a way the manicured spaces never managed. That's when he heard it. Voices. Low and urgent. Tavish froze, instincts immediately alert. He was in a section of the gardens where servants rarely came, too far from the main buildings to be casual conversation. He moved closer, keeping to the shadows of an overgrown hedge. "Told you this wouldn't work," Kate's voice, sharp with stress. "You told me it would be fine. You swore he'd never notice." A different voice, similar to Kate's, but with a different cadence, sharper edges. Lisette, the real Lisette. "I was wrong, all right? I was wrong about everything. But he knows now and he wants to talk to you, and you can't keep hiding. Watch me." "Lisette, don't. Just don't. You don't get to lecture me about responsibility when this entire disaster is your idea. I was trying to help you." "Help me? Help me? You stuffed me in the servants' quarters and made me hide like a criminal while you paraded around in my place, making a mockery of everything." The bitterness in those words could have stripped paint. Tavish knew he should reveal himself, announce his presence, something. But he stayed frozen, listening to sisters who'd clearly reached their breaking point. "What was I supposed to do?" Kate's voice cracked. "Watch you be forced into a marriage you didn't want? Let father sell you off like property? So you took my place without asking, made decisions for me, lied to everyone, including him. I did what I thought was right. You did what was easy for you, what let you feel like a hero. You didn't think about what happens when it all falls apart. You never think about that part." The accusation landed hard. Kate made a small, hurt sound. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" Lisette's laugh was harsh. "Nothing about this is fair. Not the alliance, not the expectations, not the fact that our entire worth is measured by our ability to seal political deals with our wombs." Tavish winced. She wasn't wrong. "So what's your plan?" Kate asked, sounding exhausted. "Hide in the gardens forever? Hope everyone forgets about you?" "My plan is to leave, tonight, while everyone's distracted by the ceremony that's not going to happen." "Leave? Where would you even go?" "Anywhere but here. They'll find you. Father will send trackers. Let him try. I'm done being his bargaining chip." "Lisette, please, just talk to him, to Tavish. He's not what you think. What I think is that he's an alpha who expects compliance and obedience and a mate who'll smile and nod and pop out airs, and I'm not interested. That's not who he is. How would you know? You spent 3 days lying to him." That shut Kate up. Tavish had heard enough. He stepped out from behind the hedge, making just enough noise that they'd hear him coming. Both women spun around. Up close, the resemblance was uncanny. Identical faces, identical coloring. But where Kate carried herself with nervous uncertainty, Lisette stood with her chin up and shoulders back, defensive and defiant. There was fire in her eyes. And the moment those eyes met his, Tavish's world exploded. The bond hit him like a physical blow, sudden, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. A second heartbeat crashed into existence, synchronized with his own, a rhythm he'd lived without for 32 years and now couldn't imagine existing without. His breath caught. The world narrowed to just her face, her eyes, the thundering double pulse that wasn't his imagination or wishful thinking, but raw, undeniable reality. She felt it too. Had to. Her eyes went wide, one hand flying to her chest like she could physically stop the connection from forming. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." And she ran. Not away from the gardens, deeper into them, into the wild sections where paths disappeared and cultivation gave way to pure forest. Tavish stood frozen for 3 full seconds, his body trying to process the bond, while his mind screamed at him to move. "Go!" Kate said urgently. "Go after her, please." He went. The forest section of the gardens hadn't been maintained in years, maybe decades. Branches grabbed at Tavish's jacket as he crashed through underbrush, following the sound of breaking twigs and panicked breathing ahead of him. The bond screamed in his chest, that second heartbeat pulling him forward like a compass pointing north. He could feel her moving, feel the spike of fear and confusion, and something else, anger maybe, or desperation. The emotional feedback was overwhelming, raw and unfiltered. "Lisette!" He didn't shout. His voice carried anyway, alpha command threading through it without conscious thought. "Stop running." She didn't stop. The terrain got rougher. Roots erupted from the ground in twisted knots that threatened to trip him. Low-hanging branches forced him to duck. The manicured gardens were half a mile behind them now, replaced by genuine wilderness that had reclaimed this corner of the estate. Ahead, he heard her stumble. A sharp intake of breath, a muffled curse. He found her 20 yards later, sitting against a massive oak tree, one hand clutching her ankle. "Leave me alone," she said without looking up. Tavish stopped a careful distance away, hands visible, trying to calm his own racing heart. The bond was making it difficult to think clearly. Every instinct screamed at him to close the distance, to touch her, to confirm this impossible connection was real. He forced himself to stay put. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm fine." "Your ankle." "I said I'm fine." She looked up then, and the full force of those eyes hit him again. Gray-blue, fierce, rimmed with angry tears. "Go back to the ceremony. Marry my sister. Pretend this never happened." "That's not how this works." "It could be. No one else knows. Kate can still—" "I felt it." The words came out rough. "The bond. The second heartbeat. Everything everyone said it would be." She flinched like he'd struck her. "Don't. You felt it too." "That doesn't matter." "How can it not matter? It's everything. It's biology." She pushed herself upright, wincing as weight hit her injured ankle. "It's chemical reactions and evolutionary programming, and it doesn't change anything about what I want." "What do you want?" "Not this. Not you. Not any of it." The words should have stung. Instead, Tavish heard the fear underneath them. "You're lying." "Excuse me?" "You're scared. I can feel it through the bond, but you're not scared of me specifically. You're scared of what I represent." She laughed bitterly. "Oh, you can read my emotions now? How convenient. That's how bonding works, or so I'm told. This is new for me too." That seemed to throw her. Some of the defiance leaked from her posture. "You really didn't know? Before today?" "I suspected something was wrong. I didn't know it was your sister until she told me an hour ago." Lizette leaned harder against the tree, some of the fight draining out of her. "Kate's an idiot. She was trying to protect you. She was trying to fix something that can't be fixed." She closed her eyes, breathing carefully. "You should go. The ceremony starts in less than 2 hours. You need time to figure out what you're going to say." "I'm not going anywhere." "Then we'll just stand here in the woods until sunset? That's your plan?" "My plan is to talk to you like an actual person instead of a political asset." Her eyes snapped open. "I'm not a person to anyone who matters. I'm a bargaining chip, a way to seal alliances and secure borders. That's all I've ever been. Not to me. I don't even know me." "Then let me." She stared at him for a long moment, something complicated moving across her face. "Why? Why does it matter? You could go back right now, proceed with Kate, and have everything you need. The alliance, the peace, a willing partner who actually wants this. Because the bond chose you, not her." "The bond is wrong." "Is it?" Tavish moved closer, just one step. "Because from where I'm standing, it makes perfect sense. The woman I was supposed to marry showed none of the intelligence or fire described in the reports. You've displayed both in the last 5 minutes. Flattery won't work on me. Good. I'm terrible at it anyway." He took another careful step. "Tell me what you're running from." "Everything. Be specific." She looked away, jaw tight. "You want specifics? Fine. I'm running from a father who sees daughters as currency. From a council that spent 2 years negotiating my future without once asking what I wanted. From the expectation that I'll smile and nod and produce heirs and never question whether there might be more to life than being someone's political advantage." "That's fair." She looked startled. "What?" "Those are all legitimate reasons to run. Your father sounds like an ass. The council system is broken, and the expectation that you'll just comply because it's traditional is garbage." "Oh, she seemed genuinely confused by his agreement. "But," Tavish continued, "running won't fix any of that. It'll just delay the problem until they track you down or force Kate into the role permanently. Kate can handle it better than I can. Kate is terrified and completely out of her depth. I spent 3 days watching her nearly have panic attacks every time someone asked a direct question." Lizette's expression softened slightly. She really was that bad. She was awful. Sweet, but awful. No offense. None taken. She's always been the gentle one. Something like guilt crossed her face. "I shouldn't have let her do this." Why did you? The question hung between them. Lizette shifted her weight, testing her ankle, and grimaced. Because I was desperate. Because the alternative was going through with a marriage I didn't want to someone I didn't know for reasons that had nothing to do with my actual life. And now? Now the bond exists whether I want it or not, and you're standing here expecting me to just accept it. I'm not expecting anything. I'm asking what you want. She met his eyes, and he felt the bond pulse between them, that impossible double heartbeat that was somehow both foreign and familiar. I want to leave. Tonight. Go somewhere no one knows me and build a life that's actually mine. Okay. That threw her completely. Okay? That's it? No argument? No demands? You want to leave? Leave. I won't stop you. The alliance will survive or it won't. That's not your responsibility. My father will send people after me. Then we'll deal with them. We? She caught the word immediately. There's no we. I just told you I'm leaving. And I just told you I won't stop you, but the bond exists now. That means wherever you go, you'll feel me. My emotions, my location, eventually my thoughts if it strengthens the way bonded pairs describe. You can run to the other side of the world and you'll still carry me with you. Her face went pale. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's reality. So we can either fight it or we can figure out how to work with it. You want to come with me? Just abandon your territory and your responsibilities and run away? I didn't say that. I'm saying we have options beyond the binary choice everyone's been presenting. She studied him suspiciously. What options? Honest ones. We go back. Together. We tell everyone the truth, the deception, the bond, all of it. And then we negotiate new terms. They'll never accept that. Maybe not. But at least it'll be real. Lizette was quiet for a long moment, clearly thinking it through. You're insane, you know that, right? You're proposing we walk back into that hall and just blow up the entire alliance. I'm proposing we build something better on a foundation that isn't a lie. And if it doesn't work, if they refuse, then we leave together, both of us. Let them sort out the mess without us. She laughed, sharp and surprised. You'd actually do that? Walk away from everything? For the chance at something real? Yeah, I would. The bond pulsed again, stronger this time. He saw the exact moment she felt it. Her hand moved to her chest, fingers pressing against her sternum like she could physically hold back the connection. This is too much, she whispered. It's too fast. I don't know you, you don't know me, and you're talking about upending everything based on, what? Biology? Chemistry? Based on the fact that in 10 minutes, you've been more honest with me than anyone has been in 3 days. Based on the fact that you're smart enough to recognize a broken system and brave enough to try to escape it. Based on... He stopped, made himself say it. Based on the fact that when I look at you, everything makes sense in a way it hasn't since this whole process started. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face. I don't want this. I know. I don't want to need someone. I know that too. And I really don't want to be the reason an entire alliance collapses. Then we make sure it doesn't collapse. We give them something better. How? Tavish moved closer, finally closing the distance between them. She didn't run. He stopped just outside, touching distance, giving her space to choose. By being honest, he said quietly. By standing in that hall and telling the truth, and forcing everyone to deal with real people instead of political symbols. They'll hate us. Probably. They'll try to force us into the original arrangement anyway. Let them try. She looked up at him, and the bond sang between them, that double heartbeat impossibly strong. Why are you doing this? You could have an easy alliance with Kate. Why choose the hard path? Because easy doesn't mean right. And because, he made himself say it, made himself vulnerable. Because I spent 3 days feeling nothing and the last 10 minutes feeling everything, and I'm not willing to go back to nothing. The words landed. He saw them hit, saw her defenses crack just slightly. My ankle hurts, she said, which was possibly the least romantic thing she could have said in the moment. Tavish couldn't help it. He laughed. Want help getting back? If I say yes, is that agreeing to your insane plan? No, it's accepting help with an injured ankle, The insane plan is a separate decision. She considered this. I haven't agreed to anything. Noted. I'm still extremely angry about all of this. That's fair. And if we do this, if we go back, I'm not promising to be a good compliant mate who does what she's told. Thank God for that. I've had enough compliance to last a lifetime. She studied his face, looking for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. All right, help me up. He moved carefully, offering his arm rather than just grabbing her. She took it, her hand warm against his forearm, and the physical contact sent the bond into overdrive. They both gasped. That's... Lizette started. Intense, Tavish finished. Does it get better? The overwhelming part? I have no idea. We're making this up as we go. She laughed, surprising both of them. At least you're honest about being clueless. It's one of my few virtues. Getting back to the cultivated gardens took twice as long as the chase had. Lizette's ankle was clearly worse than she wanted to admit, and pride only got her so far before she had to accept more support. By the time they emerged from the wild section, she was leaning heavily on him, and the bond had settled into something less overwhelming but still present, that constant awareness of her beside him, her pain, her exhaustion, her determination not to show weakness. Kate was waiting exactly where they'd left her, pacing a groove into the garden path. She looked up at their approach and her whole face transformed with relief. Oh, thank... She stopped, taking in Lizette's injured ankle and the way she was clinging to Tavish. What happened? I tripped running away from my problems, Lizette said dryly. Very heroic. Are you okay? Define okay. Kate looked between them, clearly trying to read the situation. Did you two talk? We talked, Tavish confirmed. And? And we have a plan, Lizette said. A terrible, probably doomed plan that's going to make everyone furious. But a plan nonetheless, Tavish added. Kate's eyes widened. You're going through with the ceremony? Not exactly, Lizette said. Then what? We're going to tell them the truth, Tavish said simply. All of it. The deception, the bond, everything. Kate went very still. You can't. The alliance will be built on honesty, or it won't be built at all. He kept his voice gentle but firm. I'm sorry, Kate. I know you were trying to help. But this ends now. They'll be furious. Father will... She looked at Lizette, face crumpling. I'm so sorry. I thought I was protecting you, and I just made everything worse. Yeah, you did, Lizette agreed, but her tone was softer than her words. But I let you do it. We're both idiots. The idiot twins, Kate said weakly. That's us. They looked at each other, something passing between them that Tavish didn't fully understand. Twin communication, maybe, or just the weight of shared mistakes. What do you need from me? Kate asked finally. Get cleaned up. Put on something that makes you look like yourself, not me. And be ready to stand with us when we walk into that hall. You want me there? You started this mess. You're helping end it. Kate nodded, then looked at Tavish. She'll need clothes too. The ceremonial dress. And someone to help with her ankle. I can handle my own ankle, Lizette protested. You can barely walk. Minor detail. Tavish made a decision. Kate, go prepare yourself. I'll take care of Lizette. Both women looked at him sharply. That's not appropriate, Kate said automatically. Appropriate went out the window about 3 days ago. We have 90 minutes until sunset. Let's use them wisely. Kate hesitated, then nodded and fled toward the main building, leaving Tavish alone with Lizette in a garden that was rapidly filling with shadows as the sun dropped toward the horizon. So, Lizette said, you're taking care of me now? Unless you'd prefer to hobble back on your own. I would prefer my ankle hadn't betrayed me in the first place. Ankles are notoriously untrustworthy. She snorted, which turned into a wince as she shifted weight. Where are we going? My private study. It's close, it's secure, and it has medical supplies. Your private study? How scandalous. I'm a rebel at heart. They made slow progress across the grounds, avoiding the main paths where servants and guests might see them. The bond helped. Tavish could feel when Lizette needed to stop, could sense the pain spiking with each step. By the time they reached his study, she was gritting her teeth against obvious agony. He got her settled in one of the leather chairs and went to find the medical kit Marcus kept stocked for exactly these situations. Bandages, pain medication, an ice pack that probably wasn't cold anymore, but would help anyway. "Let me see," he said, kneeling in front of her chair. "I can do it myself." "Lizette." "What?" "Let me help." She stared at him for a moment, then slowly, reluctantly, extended her injured ankle. The boot had to come off first. She bit back a sound as he eased it free, revealing an ankle that was already swelling and starting to bruise. "That looks painful," Tavish said. "Your observational skills are astounding." He smiled despite himself and reached for the ice pack. "This might be warm. Sorry." It was, in fact, barely cool, but he pressed it gently against the swelling anyway, and she hissed through her teeth. "Tell me about yourself," he said, trying to distract her. "Why?" "Because we're about to walk into a hall full of people and claim we're true mates. Might help if we knew basic facts about each other." "Fair point." She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes. "What do you want to know?" "Favorite color?" "That's what you're leading with? Favorite color?" "Start simple. Work up to the complicated stuff." "Green, the kind you only see in forests after rain." "Favorite food?" "Anything I didn't have to eat at a formal dinner with political implications." "So, everything?" "Pretty much." He wrapped her ankle carefully, trying to ignore how aware he was of touching her, of the bond humming between them with every point of contact. "What did you want to be?" Before the alliance negotiations started? She was quiet for a moment. "A teacher. Maybe. Or a translator. Something where I could use my brain instead of just my bloodline." "You can still do that." "Can I? After today, I'll either be your bonded mate or a scandal that destroyed an alliance. Not sure either option leads to teaching." "We'll figure it out." "You're very optimistic for someone about to commit political suicide." "One of us has to be." He finished wrapping the ankle and sat back. "How's that?" "Better. Thank you." She opened her eyes, looking at him with something softer than the anger from before. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." "What did you expect?" "Honestly, someone more like Kate. Nervous, compliant, willing to go along with whatever was decided for her. And instead you got me." "Yeah, I got you." He said it without thinking, and realized it was true. Despite everything, the deception, the chaos, the political nightmare waiting for them in the hall, he didn't regret it. The bond pulsed in agreement. Lizette felt it too. He saw her hand move to her chest again, that unconscious gesture. "This is going to complicate everything, isn't it?" "Probably." "Good. I was worried things might be too simple." He laughed, and she smiled. A real smile this time, not the polite mask she'd probably been trained to wear. "We should get ready," he said, standing. "Ceremonial dress awaits." "I hate ceremonial dress." "Me too. We'll suffer together." She let him help her up, and they stood there for a moment, closer than strictly necessary, the bond singing between them. "Tavish," she said quietly, "after we do this, after we tell everyone the truth, things are going to get ugly." "I know." "They might force us apart. My father has resources, political pressure. He could try, but the bond exists now. That's not something politics can undo." "You're sure about this? Really sure?" He met her eyes, let her see the truth in his. "I'm sure I'd rather face the ugliness with you than face easy compliance with anyone else." She studied his face, looking for doubt. He wouldn't find it. "All right," she said finally. "Let's go commit political suicide together." "That's the spirit." They made it halfway to the door before Marcus appeared, looking harried and furious. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere. Garrett's demanding another meeting. The elders are asking questions. The guests are starting to gather, and nobody knows where—" He stopped, actually seeing them for the first time. "Who's this? Marcus? Meet Lizette. The real one." Marcus stared, looked between them, looked at Tavish like he'd lost his mind. "The real one. It's complicated. It's always complicated with you. This time it's justified." Tavish quickly explained the twin situation, the bond, the plan. Marcus listened with increasing horror. "You're going to announce this? In front of everyone? Right before the ceremony? That's the idea. They'll riot. The council will call for your head. Lord Garrett will... Actually, I don't know what Garrett will do, but it won't be good. Probably not. And you're okay with this? Marcus looked at Lizette. Not even a little bit, she said honestly. But the alternative is worse. Marcus closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. I need you to understand that I'm only supporting this because I've known you for 15 years and you've never been this certain about anything. I appreciate that. Also because if this goes badly, I'm going to say I told you so for the rest of your natural life. That's fair. Marcus opened his eyes. What do you need from me? Keep the elders from storming out before we get there. Make sure Kate is somewhere visible, and maybe have an exit strategy ready, just in case. An exit strategy. In case we need to leave quickly. You mean flee? I prefer strategic retreat. Marcus laughed, sharp and incredulous. You're actually serious about this? Completely. Then we better get moving. Sunset's in 45 minutes, and if you're going to destroy an alliance, you should at least be on time. The walk to the sacred grove felt like marching toward execution. Word had spread that something was happening. Tavish could see it in the way servants watched them pass, in the hushed conversations that stopped when they approached, in the tension that crackled through the evening air. Lizette walked beside him, chin up, ceremonial dress somehow procured and fitted in record time. She was limping slightly, but hiding it well. The bond thrummed between them, equal parts terror and determination. Last chance to back out, she murmured as the grove came into view. Not a chance. Even knowing this could cost you everything? Even knowing that. She glanced at him, something fierce and grateful in her eyes. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Can it be both? The grove was packed, hundreds of people, all dressed in formal attire, all waiting for a ceremony that was about to go spectacularly wrong. Elder Morvain stood at the center, ceremonial robes pristine, expression expectant. The council members flanked him, Tavish's people on one side, the Eastern Reaches delegation on the other. Kate stood off to the right, wearing a simple dress, her face pale but set. Lord Garrett saw them first. His expression went through several rapid transitions: confusion, recognition, calculation. Then everyone else started noticing. The murmurs began, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. That's not... Wait, who is... There are two of them? Tavish kept walking, Lizette's hand tucked into the crook of his arm, toward the center of the grove where Elder Morvain waited with increasing bewilderment. Alpha Caulfield, the elder said carefully. This is unexpected. That's one word for it. Tavish stopped in the center of the grove, Lizette beside him, and turned to face the assembled crowd. I need to make an announcement before the ceremony proceeds. The murmurs grew louder. The woman who has been presented as Lizette Rouvain for the past 3 days, Tavish said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent grove, was not Lizette Rouvain. It was her twin sister, Catherine. Chaos erupted. The explosion of voices hit like a physical wall, 300 people shouting at once, the sound bouncing off trees and stone markers until it became impossible to distinguish individual words from the collective roar. Tavish felt Lizette tense beside him, her hand tightening on his arm. Through the bond, he felt her fear spike, then get ruthlessly shoved down beneath something harder. Determination, maybe, or just stubborn pride. Either worked. Elder Morvain's face had gone from bewildered to thunderous in about 3 seconds flat. What is the meaning of this? Exactly what I said. The woman you've been negotiating with, speaking to, and preparing for this ceremony is Catherine Rouvain, not Lizette. That's impossible. We verified. You verified that she's a Rouvain daughter. You didn't verify which one. Tavish kept his voice level, letting the alpha command thread through just enough to cut through the noise. They're identical twins. The deception was deliberate. Lord Garrett pushed forward through the crowd, his expression carefully neutral in a way that meant he was furious. This is an outrageous accusation. If there's been some confusion, there's been no confusion, just deliberate fraud. A new voice cut through the chaos. An older man, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, dressed in the formal regalia of the Eastern Reaches High Council. Tavish recognized him from the intelligence reports. Malcolm Rouvain, Lizette and Catherine's father, and he looked ready to commit murder. "You dare stand here and accuse my family of fraud?" Malcolm's voice carried the kind of authority that came from decades of political maneuvering. "Based on what evidence? The word of a man who clearly wants to escape his obligations? Based on the fact that your daughter just admitted it to me. Both of them." Tavish met Malcolm's glare without flinching. "The real Lizette has been hiding on the grounds for 3 days while Catherine took her place." "Preposterous." "Is it?" Tavish gestured to where Kate stood, pale but present. "Ask her yourself, or better yet, ask them to stand side by side and explain the differences you somehow missed." Malcolm's gaze snapped to Catherine, then to Lizette, then back again. Something flickered across his face, recognition, maybe, or calculation about how to spin this. "Even if what you say is true," he said slowly, "it changes nothing. An alliance was agreed upon. A Rouvain daughter for the Western Territories Alpha. The specific daughter is immaterial." "Like hell it is," Lizette said, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the grove. Every eye turned to her. "I am not immaterial," she continued, her voice steady despite the tremor Tavish could feel through the bond. "I am not interchangeable, and I am not going to stand here and let you pretend that switching me out like a defective part in some political machine is acceptable." "Lizette," Malcolm's tone held warning. "No, you don't get to silence me anymore." She stepped forward, away from Tavish's supporting arm, putting weight on her injured ankle without flinching. "You want to talk about obligations? Fine. Let's talk about how you spent 2 years negotiating my future without once asking what I wanted. How you treated me like property to be bartered. How when I expressed doubts, you told me my feelings were irrelevant compared to the needs of the territory. You have a duty. I have a life. Or I'm supposed to, but you never saw me as a person, just as a tool to secure your political legacy." The crowd had gone silent, everyone watching the confrontation with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for public executions. Malcolm's face had gone red. "You ungrateful!" "Choose your next words very carefully," Tavish said quietly, but the alpha command in his voice made it impossible to ignore. "Because if you finish that sentence the way I think you're going to, we're going to have a much bigger problem." Malcolm turned on him. "You have no authority here, no right to interfere in how I manage my family." "Actually, I have every right. Because about an hour ago, the bond formed. The real bond. With the real Lizette." Tavish let that sink in. "Which means she's my mate. And if you think I'm going to stand here and let you verbally abuse her, you've severely misjudged the situation." The silence that followed was absolute. "The bond," Elder Morvain said slowly, "formed? You're certain?" "Completely certain. But that's—" The elder looked between Tavish and Lizette, then at Catherine. "If the bond formed with Lizette, then the original match was correct. Just delayed." "Delayed by a twin swap that nearly derailed the entire alliance," Marcus interjected, appearing at Tavish's other side. "Let's not gloss over that part." "A mistake made out of desperation," Kate said, her voice small but clear. She stepped forward to stand beside her sister. "Lizette didn't want the marriage. She asked me to help her escape. I thought if I took her place temporarily, it would give her time to figure out what she really wanted. I didn't mean to deceive anyone. I just wanted to protect my sister." "By committing fraud?" someone in the crowd shouted. "By being loyal to the person who's been loyal to me my entire life," Kate shot back, finding her spine. "Yes, we lied. Yes, it was wrong. But you want to know what else is wrong? Forcing someone into a permanent bond against their will, treating people like political chess pieces, acting like love and choice don't matter compared to territorial advantage." Murmurs rippled through the crowd again, less angry now, more uncertain. Tavish's own council members were conferring in urgent whispers. The Eastern Reaches delegation looked torn between outrage and confusion, and Malcolm Rouvain looked like he was calculating exactly how to salvage this disaster to his advantage. "The bond has formed," Malcolm said finally, his tone shifting to something more measured. "That confirms the match was always meant to be with Lizette. The deception, while regrettable, ultimately led to the correct outcome. I propose we proceed with the original ceremony, acknowledging that there was initial confusion about which daughter was present. Confusion, Lizette repeated flatly. You're calling deliberate deception confusion? I'm calling it a mistake that's been corrected. The alliance can still proceed as planned. No. The single word spoken by Tavish cut through Malcolm's momentum like a knife. No? Malcolm's eyebrows rose. You just confirmed the bond exists. The correct match has been identified. What possible objection? My objection is that you're still treating this like a transaction, still acting like Lizette's choice doesn't matter. Tavish moved to stand fully beside her, presenting a united front. The bond exists, that's true, but that doesn't mean we're proceeding with a ceremony built on lies and political pressure. Elder Morvain stepped forward, his expression troubled. Alpha Caulfield, I understand your frustration, but the ceremony has been prepared. The guests are assembled. The alliance hinges on this union. Then the alliance needs better foundations, Tavish said. Because I'm not binding myself to anyone, mate or not, under these circumstances. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. You're refusing the bond, one of his council members asked, shocked. I'm refusing a ceremony that treats my mate like she has no say in her own future. There's a difference. Lizette turned to look at him, something fierce and grateful blazing in her eyes. Through the bond, he felt her emotions shift, fear giving way to hope, desperation transforming into something that felt almost like joy. What are you proposing instead? Lord Garrett asked. He'd been quiet through most of the confrontation, watching with that calculating expression that meant he was looking for angles. I'm proposing we tell the truth, all of it, and then we negotiate a real alliance, one where all parties are willing participants, not coerced into compliance. Tavish addressed the crowd as much as the council members. Yes, Catherine and Lizette committed fraud. Yes, that was wrong. But it happened because the system is broken, because we treat bonding like a business transaction instead of a personal choice. Bonding has always served political purposes, Malcolm argued. That's how our society functions. Maybe our society functions badly, Lizette said. Maybe the fact that my sister and I felt compelled to lie to hundreds of people means something is fundamentally wrong with how we approach these alliances. You're proposing we abandon centuries of tradition? An elderly woman from the Eastern Reaches delegation asked, her voice sharp. I'm proposing we examine whether those traditions still serve us, Tavish said. Because from where I'm standing, tradition nearly destroyed any chance of this alliance succeeding. The bond only formed when we stopped following the script and started being honest. Marcus was giving him a look that clearly said, "You're going off script, and I have no idea where this is leading," but he stayed silent, letting Tavish steer. So what happens now? Elder Morvain asked. The ceremony is meant to begin at sunset. That's in 15 minutes. You've exposed the deception, confirmed the bond, and now you're refusing to proceed. What is your actual plan? Good question. Tavish had been making this up as he went, riding on adrenaline and conviction and the absolute certainty that marrying Lizette under these circumstances would poison everything from the start. He looked at her, really looked at her, and found her watching him with those fierce gray-blue eyes. Through the bond, he felt her waiting, not with resignation, but with genuine curiosity about what he'd say next. Trust. She was trusting him to have a plan. He better come up with one. Here's what's going to happen, Tavish said, turning back to face the assembly. Lizette and I are going to have the private conversation we should have had 3 days ago, alone. No council oversight, no political pressure. Just two people discussing what they actually want. Unacceptable, Malcolm said immediately. There must be oversight. There must be nothing, Tavish cut him off. Your daughter is an adult. I'm an adult. And we're going to talk like adults without a committee supervising our every word. And if you can't reach an agreement, Garrett asked, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I'm not making decisions about the rest of my life, about our lives. He gestured to include Lizette, in front of an audience. The alliance will wait an hour. If it can't survive that long, it was never going to work anyway. Elder Morvain looked deeply unhappy, but he nodded slowly. 1 hour. Then we reconvene and you present your decision. Agreed. This is irregular, Malcolm protested. Good, Lizette said. I'm tired of regular. Regular got us into this mess. She took Tavish's offered arm, and together they walked out of the sacred grove, leaving behind a crowd of stunned witnesses and the wreckage of a ceremony that was never going to happen the way anyone expected. The walk to Tavish's study was silent. Not awkward silence, something heavier, charged. The bond hummed between them, that constant awareness that was starting to feel less overwhelming and more like a permanent feature of his existence. He could feel Lizette's emotions cycling through a dozen different states: relief, fear, determination, exhaustion. His ankle was bothering her more than she'd admit. When they reached his study, he shut the door firmly and turned to find her already collapsing into the same leather chair she'd occupied earlier. "Well," she said, "that went spectacularly." Depends on your definition of spectacular. I define it as public humiliation combined with family drama and a side of political catastrophe. So yes, spectacular. Tavish poured 2 drinks from the cabinet, handed her one, and took the chair opposite. "For what it's worth, I thought you were magnificent." She blinked at him over the rim of her glass. "Magnificent? I just destroyed any chance of a peaceful resolution. You stood up to your father in front of 300 people. That took courage. That took stupidity. He's going to make my life miserable for this. He can try. But you're not alone anymore." The words hung in the air between them. Lizette took a long drink, wincing as the whiskey burned. "About that. The bond. We should probably talk about what it actually means." "Agreed. Because from my understanding, bonded pairs are supposed to be together, like permanently. No divorce, no separation, just bound for life. That's the general idea. And you're okay with that? With being permanently connected to someone you met 3 hours ago?" Tavish considered the question seriously. "A week ago, I would have said no. I spent my entire adult life avoiding exactly this kind of commitment, but the bond exists now whether we wanted it or not. And honestly," he met her eyes, "yeah, I'm okay with it. You're smart, brave, and you called your father out in front of his entire delegation. Those are excellent qualities in a mate." She laughed, sharp and surprised. "You have low standards." "I have excellent standards. You're just meeting all of them." "We don't know each other." "Then we'll learn. That's what time is for." "What if we learn we're incompatible?" "Then we'll be incompatible people who are bonded for life, but at least we'll be honest about it." She studied him for a long moment. "You're serious? You really want this?" "I want a chance at something real, and I want you to have a choice in what happens next. Those 2 things aren't mutually exclusive. What if my choice is to leave? To walk away from the alliance and the territories and all of it? Then I'll help you pack." "You'd really do that? Let me go even with the bond?" "Lizette, I'm not keeping you against your will, bond or no bond. If you genuinely want to leave, I won't stop you, but—" He leaned forward. "I'd like you to consider staying, not for the alliance, not for your father or my counsel or political necessity. For us, for the chance to see what we could build together." She was quiet, turning her glass between her hands. "You're asking me to trust you." "I'm asking you to trust yourself. What do you want?" "I don't know. A week ago, I wanted to escape, to build a life where I wasn't defined by my bloodline or my reproductive capabilities, where I could be just me. And now? Now I have a bond I didn't ask for tethering me to someone I barely know, and somehow that someone is the first person who's asked what I want instead of telling me what I should want." She looked up at him. "It's disorienting." "Welcome to my entire week." That got a small smile. "Fair point." Tavish set his glass down and leaned back. "Here's what I know. The bond exists. It's real. I can feel you right now, your exhaustion, your pain, that thing you're doing where you're trying to logic your way through emotions. I don't do that." "You absolutely do that. It's very endearing." She threw a cushion at him. He caught it, grinning. "The point is," he continued, "we're connected now. That's not changing. But what we do with that connection, that's entirely up to us. We can fight it, resent it, treat it like a burden. Or we can see it as an opportunity." Opportunity for what? To build something better than what either of us had before. A partnership based on honesty instead of obligation. A bond that enhances our lives instead of restricting them. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's going to be complicated and messy and probably involve a lot of arguing with your father. But simple isn't what we need. We need real. Lisette was quiet for a long time, her eyes distant. Through the bond, Tavish felt her turning the idea over, examining it from every angle. Finally, she spoke. If I stay, and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what would that look like, practically speaking? Honestly, I have no idea. We'd be making it up as we went. That's not reassuring. No, but it's honest. We could start with actually getting to know each other. Figure out how this bond works. Negotiate what role you'd want in the territory, if any. If any? You said you wanted to teach, or translate. Maybe we figure out how to make that happen. The alliance doesn't require you to be my political accessory. It just requires a bond between territories. We've got the bond. The rest is negotiable. She looked at him with something like wonder. You're serious? You'd actually let me pursue my own interests? Why wouldn't I? Because that's not how this works. The alpha's mate is supposed to support the alpha's interests, be seen and decorative and produce heirs. That's how it's worked traditionally, doesn't mean that's how it has to work. He paused. Although, fair warning, my council is going to push back on this. Hard. And you'd fight them? I'd fight anyone who tried to force you into a role you didn't choose, including myself. The bond pulsed between them, stronger now. She felt it too. Her hand moved to her chest, that gesture he was starting to recognize. This is a lot, she said quietly. Yeah, it is. And you're asking me to decide everything in the next... She checked the window where the sun was touching the horizon. 20 minutes? I'm not asking you to decide everything, just one thing. Do you want to try? Not commit to forever. Not promise it'll work. Just try. She stood, wincing as her ankle protested, and moved to the window. Tavish stayed in his chair, giving her space to think. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, light filtering through the trees and turning everything soft. My father is going to be insufferable, Lisette said finally. He'll take credit for the match, claim he knew all along it would work out. Probably. And Kate is going to feel guilty about the deception for months. Most likely. And the council is going to expect me to fall in line and be a proper alpha's mate. Almost certainly. But you won't. No, I won't. She turned from the window to face him. Why? Why are you different? I'm not. I'm just as messed up as everyone else. But I spent 3 days feeling nothing, and the last 3 hours feeling everything. And somewhere in there I realized that maybe the system has been wrong all along. Maybe bonds should be partnerships, not ownership. Maybe mates should choose each other instead of being chosen for each other. That's radical thinking. Good thing I'm an alpha. People might actually listen. She smiled then, a real smile, bright and genuine. You're either going to change everything or destroy everything. Can it be both? Apparently that's your specialty. Tavish stood, crossing to where she stood by the window. So what's your answer? Are you willing to try? She looked up at him, gray-blue eyes steady despite the fear he could feel thrumming through the bond. I want conditions. Name them. I want my own space. Not separate quarters necessarily, but somewhere that's mine, where I can think without political pressure. Done. I want to pursue teaching, or translation, or whatever I decide, even if it doesn't directly benefit the territory. Agreed. And I want honesty, complete honesty. No political maneuvering between us. No strategic conversations where you're trying to manage me instead of talking to me. You have my word. Those are big promises to make in 20 minutes. They're also the right ones. She studied his face, looking for doubt or deception. Whatever she found satisfied her because she nodded slowly. All right, I'll try. But Tavish? Yeah? If you break any of those promises, bond or no bond, I will make your life miserable. That's fair. I'm serious. I will... He kissed her. Not because he wanted to silence her, because the bond was singing, because she was magnificent even while threatening him, because in 20 minutes she'd gone from terrified runaway to negotiating partner, and he was fairly certain he was completely gone for her. She made a surprised sound, then kissed him back, fierce and certain, and the bond exploded between them like fireworks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lizette looked dazed. That was, yeah, we should probably, definitely. Neither of them moved. They're waiting for us, she said. Let them wait. Tavish, fine, but for the record, I'm looking forward to doing that again. Noted. They walked back to the sacred grove hand in hand, and somewhere along the path, Tavish realized that his entire life had shifted in the space of a few hours. The crowd had not dispersed. If anything, it had grown. Word of the confrontation apparently spreading to anyone who'd stayed home. Elder Morvain looked relieved to see them. Malcolm looked calculating. Kate looked hopeful and terrified in equal measure. Marcus just raised an eyebrow that clearly said, well? Tavish squeezed Lizette's hand once, then addressed the assembly. We've reached a decision. The bond is real. The match is confirmed. And we're willing to proceed on our terms. Which are, Malcolm asked sharply, that this alliance is built on truth, not tradition. That Lizette enters it as an equal partner, not a political asset. And that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The silence was deafening. Then, surprisingly, Lord Garrett smiled. Actually smiled. About time someone challenged the system, he said. I was beginning to think this generation had no spine. Malcolm sputtered. You can't possibly support this. I support an alliance that might actually work, instead of one built on resentment and lies. If the alpha and his mate want to redefine how bonds function, that's their prerogative. The council will adapt, or they won't. Either way, the bond has formed. Fighting it now would be pointless. Other voices joined in, some supportive, some outraged, all overlapping until Elder Morvain raised his hands for once. Enough. The hour has passed. A decision has been made. The question now is whether we proceed with the ceremony or end the alliance entirely. Tavish looked at Lizette. Through the bond, he felt her gathering her courage. We proceed, she said clearly, but not with the ceremony as planned. We're writing our own vows, speaking our own truth, and anyone who can't accept that is welcome to leave now. No one left. Elder Morvain sighed deeply. Very well. A modified ceremony. May fate have mercy on us all. Fate already did, Tavish said quietly, looking at Lizette. We just had to be brave enough to accept it. The ceremony that followed was nothing like the one that had been planned. No scripted vows, no formal rituals passed down through centuries. Just two people standing in a grove at sunset, speaking honest words about partnership and choice and the terrifying, exhilarating prospect of building something new together. When Elder Morvain finally pronounced them bonded, more in resignation than celebration, the applause was scattered and uncertain. But Tavish didn't care, because Lizette was smiling at him like he'd given her the world instead of just the freedom to choose it. And through the bond, strong and clear and undeniable, he felt her joy matched perfectly to his own. The celebration that followed was awkward at best. Half the guests seemed uncertain whether they should be applauding or protesting. The other half were too busy gossiping to do either. Servants circulated with wine and food that had been prepared for a very different ceremony, and the whole affair had the strange energy of a party where no one was quite sure what they were celebrating. Tavish stood with Lizette at the edge of the grove, watching the chaos unfold with a kind of detached amusement. We should probably mingle, Lizette said, though she made no move to do so. Probably. Your council looks like they want to strangle you. That's their default expression. My father looks worse. Tavish followed her gaze to where Malcolm Rouvain stood in heated conversation with several Eastern Reaches council members, his gestures sharp and agitated. Give him time. He'll find a way to spin this to his advantage. That's what I'm afraid of. Through the bond, Tavish felt her exhaustion settling in, the adrenaline crash after hours of sustained terror and defiance. Her ankle was definitely bothering her, and she was favoring it in a way she probably thought was subtle. We don't have to stay, he said quietly. We're the reason everyone's here. We can't just leave. Watch me. Before she could protest, he signaled to Marcus, who materialized at his elbow with impressive speed. Get us out of here, Tavish said, quietly, before someone decides to make another speech. Marcus grinned. Already on it. There's a path through the back of the grove that leads to the east wing. No one's watching it. You're a genius. I know. They slipped away while Elder Morvain was making some pronouncement about unity and new beginnings. Kate caught Tavish's eye as they left and gave a small, relieved nod. She'd handled the political fallout. That's what sisters did, apparently. The East Wing was blessedly quiet after the chaos of the Grove. Their footsteps echoed on stone floors as they walked, neither speaking, both processing the enormity of what had just happened. So, Lizette said finally, we're bonded. Apparently. That was your ceremony, the one you'll tell people about for the rest of your life. Could have been worse. Could have gone through with the original and spent the rest of my life bonded to your sister. She laughed, the sound echoing off the walls. Kate would have made you miserable. I noticed. She means well. I know. Doesn't make her any less terrible at subterfuge. They reached the suite that had been prepared for the bonded couple. Rooms Tavish hadn't seen yet, decorated by someone with more enthusiasm than taste. Everything was in shades of cream and gold, with enough flowers to stock a funeral. Wow, Lizette said, taking in the elaborate arrangements. Someone really committed to a theme. I think the theme is romantic overkill. It's working. She limped to the nearest chair and collapsed into it, finally letting the facade of composure drop. Her ankle was definitely swollen, pressing against the strap of her ceremonial shoe. Tavish knelt in front of her. Let me see. It's fine. Lizette, what happened to honesty? I'm honestly telling you it's fine. And I'm honestly telling you that through the bond, I can feel that you're in pain. So let me help. She glared at him but extended her foot. He worked the shoe off carefully, revealing an ankle that was now properly bruised, the swelling worse than before. You walked on this through the entire ceremony, he said. I wasn't going to limp down the aisle, or grove. Whatever. Pride is going to be a problem with you, isn't it? Probably. He found ice in a bucket clearly meant for champagne and improvised a cold compress with a decorative cloth that probably cost more than most people's monthly wages. Lizette hissed when he pressed it against the swelling. Sorry. I've had worse. That's not reassuring. They sat in silence for a moment, Tavish tending to her ankle, Lizette staring at the absurd flower arrangements with an expression somewhere between amusement and horror. What happens now? She asked finally. Now we figure out how to actually live together, learn each other's habits, discover all the ways we're incompatible. You're very optimistic about this bond. I'm realistic. The bond exists. That doesn't mean we won't drive each other crazy. At least you're honest about it. She paused. I snore. What? I snore. Loudly. Kate used to throw pillows at me. Tavish tried not to laugh. Failed. Good to know. And I'm terrible in the mornings, like genuinely awful. Don't talk to me before I've had tea. Tea specifically? Coffee makes me jittery, so yes, tea. And not just any tea. There's a specific blend from... She stopped. Sorry, you don't need my entire morning routine. Actually, I do. That's kind of the point of this whole thing. He adjusted the compress. I talk in my sleep, apparently. Marcus has mentioned it. Full conversations with people who aren't there. That's slightly disturbing. I also reorganize things when I'm stressed. Books, supplies, weapons, drives my staff insane. Weapons? I like things orderly. She smiled despite herself. We're going to be a disaster. Probably. But we'll be an honest disaster. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered without waiting for permission, because apparently privacy was optional. Your council wants an emergency meeting, he announced. Malcolm Rouvain is demanding one too, and Elder Morvain needs to finalize the alliance documents before the Eastern delegation leaves tomorrow. Tell them all to wait until morning, Tavish said. They're not going to like that. They haven't liked anything I've done today. One more thing won't hurt. Marcus looked at Lizette, then back at Tavish. You sure about this? Walking away from the negotiations while they're this volatile? I'm sure that my mate is injured and exhausted, and whatever political crisis is brewing can survive 12 hours. Your council's going to call you irresponsible. My council can join the very long list of people who think I'm making mistakes. Tavish stood, keeping his voice level but firm. Tell them we'll convene at dawn. All parties. We'll finalize everything then. And if they refuse to wait, then they refuse. But I'm not negotiating tonight. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll handle it. But Tavish, your father would have put the territory first. My father also died of a stress-induced heart attack at 53. I'm trying a different approach. After Marcus left, Lizette looked at him with something like wonder. You just postponed emergency council meetings. For me. For us. There's a difference. Your people are going to hate me. My people are going to have to adjust their expectations. He moved to the absurdly large bed and started removing some of the decorative pillows. There were at least 20. Besides, half of them already hate me for the stunt we pulled in the Grove. Might as well commit to the role of difficult alpha. Is that what you're going for? Difficult? I'm going for honest. If that makes me difficult, so be it. She watched him wage war with the pillows, a small smile playing at her lips. You're not what I expected. You've said that before. It bears repeating. Every story I heard about alphas made them sound controlling, domineering, obsessed with their own authority. Some of them are. I'm just obsessed with not becoming my father. What was he like? Tavish paused, a pillow in each hand. Brilliant, dedicated, completely consumed by his role. He loved the territory more than he loved his family, and it killed him. He tossed the pillows onto the floor. I watched him work himself to death trying to be perfect, trying to meet every expectation, and I swore I'd never do the same. So you became the alpha who breaks all the rules instead. Something like that. Your council must love you. My council tolerates me because the territory's doing well. If that changes, they'll replace me in a heartbeat. Can they do that? If enough of them vote for it, yeah. Alpha isn't a permanent position. It's earned and maintained. Lizette was quiet for a moment. So today, when you stood up there and announced the deception, when you refused the ceremony as planned, you risked everything. I risked following a path I knew was wrong. There's a difference. Not to your council. Then my council needs to learn the same lesson everyone else is learning, that I'm not going to make decisions based on what's politically convenient if those decisions compromise what's right. She stood carefully, testing her ankle, and crossed to where he stood beside the ridiculous bed. Thank you. For what? For choosing me over convenience, for fighting my father, for... She gestured vaguely. All of it. You fought him too, in front of everyone. That took more courage than anything I did. I was terrified. I know. I felt it through the bond, but you did it anyway. She looked up at him, gray blue eyes serious. This bond thing, the emotional feedback, is it always going to be this intense? I have no idea. We're making it up as we go, remember? That's not comforting. No, but it's honest. She laughed, then winced as her ankle protested. I should probably get off my feet. Probably. Neither of them moved. Tavish? Yeah? I'm glad it was you, the bond, I mean. If it had to happen, I'm glad it was with someone who sees me as a person instead of a political asset. Something in his chest loosened at the words. I'm glad it was you too, even though you're stubborn and you snore and you'll probably make my life complicated. I will absolutely make your life complicated. Good. I was getting bored anyway. She kissed him then, softer than before, less urgent, but no less certain. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady. When they broke apart, she was smiling. We should probably sleep. Dawn meetings wait for no one. Unfortunately true. They navigated the awkwardness of sharing space for the first time with surprising ease. Lizette claimed the bathroom first, emerging 20 minutes later in a nightgown that had been provided by someone who apparently thought bondmates only wore silk and lace. I look ridiculous, she announced. You look fine. I look like I'm trying to seduce you. I mean, Tavish grinned. Are you? She threw a pillow at him. Go get ready before I change my mind about this whole bond thing. The dawn meeting was exactly as painful as Tavish expected. His council arrived looking grim and determined. Malcolm Rouvain and the Eastern delegation showed up looking calculating and vaguely hostile. Elder Morvain just looked tired, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. They assembled in the treaty room, the same space where Tavish had sparred with Lord Garrett days earlier. It felt like years ago now. Lizette sat beside him, wearing a dress that was significantly more practical than yesterday's ceremonial nonsense. Kate sat on her other side, there for moral support despite looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Let's begin," Elder Morvain said wearily. "The alliance documents require finalization. The bond has been confirmed between Alpha Caulfield and Lizette Rouvain. What remains is determining the specific terms." "The terms were agreed upon 2 years ago," Malcolm said sharply. "They don't require renegotiation." "They do if they're built on false assumptions," Tavish countered. "The original agreement assumed a compliant mate willing to fulfill traditional roles. That's not what we have. Because you've indulged her demands instead of providing proper guidance." Lizette's hand tightened on Tavish's arm. Through the bond, he felt her anger spike. "Careful," Tavish said quietly to Malcolm. "You're very close to insulting my mate." "I'm stating facts." Lizette has always been difficult, willful, unsuited to the responsibilities. "Finish that sentence and we're done here," Tavish said, alpha command threading through his voice. "Your daughter is brilliant, brave, and more than capable of any responsibility she chooses to accept. If you can't see that, the problem is you, not her." The room went silent. Malcolm's face darkened. "You would jeopardize the alliance over this?" "I would jeopardize anything that requires treating my mate as lesser. So yes, if the alliance requires Lizette to be diminished, then the alliance needs to change." "This is absurd. You've known her for less than a day. And in that day, she's shown more integrity than you've shown in 2 years of negotiations." Tavish leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. We're rewriting the alliance terms. Lizette will have full autonomy to pursue her own interests. She'll participate in territory decisions as an equal advisor, not a decorative accessory, and any clause that treats her as property gets removed entirely." "Unacceptable," Malcolm said. "Then leave. The bond exists whether you approve or not. We don't need your blessing. You need our cooperation. The Eastern Reaches controls 3 major trade routes, and the Western Territory controls the mountain passes you need for winter supplies. We both need each other, which means we negotiate as equals." Tavish kept his voice level. "You can accept new terms that respect both territories and both individuals, or you can walk away and explain to your council why you destroyed an alliance over pride." Malcolm looked ready to explode. But Lord Garrett, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "He's right." Every head turned. "The Alpha is right," Garrett continued calmly. "We've been approaching this alliance as a transaction, exchanging assets. But what happened yesterday proved that model doesn't work. The twins committed fraud because they felt trapped by it. The bond formed with the wrong daughter because the system was ignoring basic compatibility." "You're supporting this?" Malcolm demanded. "I'm supporting reality. The bond exists between these two people. They're clearly suited for each other, even if it's not the pairing we planned. Fighting that because it doesn't match tradition is pointless." Garrett pulled out a document. "I took the liberty of drafting revised terms last night. Equal partnership clauses. Individual autonomy for both parties. Shared decision-making on territory matters." Tavish stared at him. "You drafted new terms? When?" "Around 3 in the morning. I don't sleep much." Garrett slid the document across the table. "Review it. If it's acceptable, we can finalize today." Tavish scanned the pages, Lizette reading over his shoulder. The terms were actually good. Better than good. They preserved the alliance while removing every clause that treated bonded partners as property. "Why are you helping us?" Lizette asked. Garrett smiled slightly. "Because I'm tired of watching capable people be constrained by outdated systems. And because if anyone's going to shake up how we approach alliances, it might as well be the stubborn alpha and the runaway bride." "I didn't run that far," Lizette protested. "You ran far enough." He turned to Malcolm. "These terms are fair. They preserve everything important about the alliance while acknowledging that both parties are autonomous individuals. You can accept them and maintain the relationship with the Western Territory, or you can refuse and watch your political influence collapse." Malcolm looked at the document like it might bite him. "This sets a dangerous precedent." "Good," Tavish said. "The old precedent was broken." The argument continued for another 2 hours. Malcolm fought every change trying to restore traditional clauses about territory rights and mate responsibilities. Tavish's own council pushed back on some of the equality provisions, concerned about appearances and historical precedent. But slowly, grudgingly, consensus formed. By midday, the revised alliance stood ratified: equal partnership, individual autonomy, shared decision-making. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As people filed out of the treaty room, Lizette caught Tavish's hand. "We did it. You did it. Half those clauses exist because you argued for them." "I can't believe Garrett helped." "Neither can I, but I'll take it." Kate appeared at Lizette's other side, looking relieved and exhausted. "Does this mean it's over, the crisis?" "This crisis," Tavish said. "There will be others." "Wonderful. Looking forward to it." Malcolm left without saying goodbye to either of his daughters, which said everything about his character. Lizette watched him go with an expression Tavish couldn't quite read through the bond. Relief mixed with old hurt, mixed with determination not to care. "He'll come around eventually," Kate said quietly. "No, he won't," Lizette replied. "But that's okay. I don't need his approval anymore." The Eastern Reaches delegation departed that afternoon, taking their political pressure and disapproval with them. The Western Territory Council looked shell-shocked but resigned, clearly processing that their alpha had just rewritten centuries of tradition and somehow made it stick. Tavish spent the rest of the day in administrative meetings, handling the practical aftermath of upending an entire system. Lizette attended some of them, observing how territory decisions actually worked, asking sharp questions that made several council members uncomfortable. By evening, they were both exhausted. They ended up in what Lizette had already started calling the flower room. The bonding suite, with its aggressive romantic decor, collapsed on the bed that was finally free of excessive pillows. "I have a question," Lizette said, staring at the ceiling. "Just one?" "For now. The teaching thing, or translating. Was that actually serious, or were you just saying that to get me to agree?" Tavish turned on his side to face her. "Completely serious. Because running education programs or translation services for the territory seems like it would be complicated. Resources, staffing, political support. So we figure it out. What do you want to do?" She was quiet for a moment. "Both, maybe. There are border communities that need better education access, and with the alliance, we'll need people who can bridge the language gaps between territories." "Sounds perfect. Start planning it." "Just like that?" "Just like that. You're the Alpha's mate. You have resources. Use them." "Your council is going to hate this." "My council hates everything lately. They'll survive." She rolled to face him, propping her head on her hand. "You know this is going to change things, right? Not just for us, for everyone. Other bonded pairs are going to hear about this and want the same autonomy." "Good." "You're not worried about the chaos?" "I'm worried about perpetuating a system that forces people to choose between duty and happiness. If we cause chaos by offering a better option, I can live with that." She studied his face, looking for doubt. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that." "Even knowing it might cost you politically?" "Even knowing that." The bond pulsed between them, warm and steady. Through it, Tavish felt her emotions shifting, surprise giving way to trust, uncertainty transforming into something that felt almost like hope. "I think I might be falling for you," she said quietly. "Which is ridiculous because we barely know each other." "Is it ridiculous? Or is it the bond showing us what could be if we're brave enough to try?" "That's very philosophical for someone who talks in his sleep. I contain multitudes." She laughed, bright and genuine, and kissed him. The bond sang between them, stronger each time, and Tavish thought maybe this honesty, this choice, this terrifying leap into unknown territory was exactly what both of them needed. 3 months later, Lizette stood in front of the first official border education center, watching workers put the finishing touches on the building that would serve 6 communities. Tavish stood beside her, fielding questions from council members who still weren't entirely sure how they'd ended up funding an educational initiative instead of a traditional mates charity project. "The translation program starts next month," Lizette said, checking the schedule Marcus had prepared. "We have 12 candidates so far." "That's good, right?" Tavish asked. "That's excellent. I was expecting maybe 6. "You're very popular for someone who destroyed a centuries-old ceremony." "I prefer to think of it as dramatically improved." Kate appeared from inside the building, looking pleased. The library section is finished. You need to see it. They followed her inside to a space that had been transformed from bare walls into a functional learning center. Books lined the shelves, some donated, some purchased, all carefully selected to serve multiple age ranges and language levels. This is incredible, Lizette breathed. This is your vision, Kate corrected. I just helped organize it. Over the past 3 months, Kate had found her own role, managing the administrative side of Lizette's projects, coordinating between territories, smoothing over political complications. She was good at it in a way that surprised everyone, including herself. Father sent another letter, Kate said quietly. Let me guess. More demands that I return home and fulfill my proper duties? More or less. I didn't open it. Good choice. But Malcolm had spent 3 months trying various tactics to regain control. Threats, guilt, political pressure. None of it had worked. Lizette had built a life that didn't require his approval, and the freedom of it still felt miraculous. The bond with Tavish had strengthened in ways neither of them expected. They could feel each other's emotions clearly now, sometimes even catch fragments of thoughts. It was overwhelming at times, invasive at others, but mostly it was grounding. They fought, of course. Spectacularly sometimes. Lizette's stubbornness clashed with Tavish's need to fix everything, and neither of them was particularly good at backing down. But they fought honestly, and they always came back together. The council meeting is in an hour, Marcus reminded them, appearing in the doorway. The one about expanding the alliance to include the northern reaches. Tavish groaned. Can't we skip it? You're the alpha. No. Worth a try. They walked back to the main hall together, the bond humming between them, comfortable and constant. The meeting was predictably tedious, lots of discussion about trade routes and border agreements and historical precedents, but halfway through, when someone suggested that any new alliance should follow traditional bonding protocols, Lizette spoke up. With respect, the traditional protocols created the disaster we spent 3 months fixing. Maybe we consider learning from that instead of repeating it. Several council members looked startled that she'd spoken. Tavish just smiled and leaned back in his chair, letting her work. The alpha's mate shouldn't be involving herself in territory decisions, one of the older council members said stiffly. The alpha's mate is an equal partner per the revised alliance terms, Lizette countered, which you ratified. Lizette disputat. So unless you'd like to renegotiate the entire Eastern Reaches agreement, I suggest you get used to my involvement. The room fell silent. Tavish caught Marcus's eye across the table. His second was trying not to laugh. She has a point, Lord Garrett said from where he sat as an observer. He visited frequently now, ostensibly to monitor the alliance, actually because he seemed to enjoy watching traditional structures get dismantled. The revised terms grant her full participation rights. This sets a dangerous precedent. Yes, we've established that, Tavish interrupted. Everything we do sets a dangerous precedent. We're either going to embrace it or spend every meeting rehashing the same argument. The council member looked ready to protest further, but several others were nodding in agreement. Change, Tavish was learning, happened in small increments. One meeting at a time. One challenged assumption at a time. One person brave enough to speak up at a time. He reached under the table and found Lizette's hand. Through the bond, he felt her amusement and satisfaction and stubborn determination to keep pushing. Let's talk about the Northern Reaches proposal, he said, with equal partnership clauses, because apparently that's how we do things now. 6 months after the ceremony that wasn't, Tavish stood in the same sacred grove and watched another bonding take place. This one was different. No elaborate rituals, no scripted vows. Just two people who'd found each other despite political pressure, speaking honest words about partnership and choice. The council had complained, of course. Tradition was being abandoned. Standards were slipping. This would lead to chaos. It probably would, but it would be honest chaos. Beside him, Lizette was trying not to cry. They're using our vows, almost word for word. Apparently we started something. Apparently we started a revolution. That might be overstating it. Say, you stood in front of 300 people and rejected centuries of tradition. That's pretty revolutionary. I stood in front of 300 people and chose you. The revolution was incidental. She leaned against his shoulder, careful not to disrupt the ceremony. Best incidental revolution ever. The couple at the center of the grove finished their vows and kissed to genuine, enthusiastic applause. No scattered uncertainty this time. People were learning, or at least some people were learning. Tavish's council still pushed back on every change. Other territories watched with a mixture of interest and horror. And Malcolm Rouvain had apparently started a campaign to restore proper bonding protocols in the eastern reaches. But none of it mattered as much as it might have 6 months ago, because Tavish had built something real, with Lizette, with their partnership, with the growing movement of people who were tired of being told that duty mattered more than happiness. "We should get back," Lizette said as the ceremony ended. "I have 3 translation candidates to interview, and I have a meeting about water rights that Marcus swears will only take an hour." He's lying. I know. They walked back through grounds that were becoming familiar, through halls that felt more like home than they had 6 months ago. In Tavish's study, reports waited about border conflicts that had decreased 40% since the alliance, about economic growth in regions that were finally cooperating instead of competing, about other territories quietly approaching them, about revised bonding agreements, about change happening slowly but steadily. "Do you ever regret it?" Lizette asked, settling into the chair that had become unofficially hers. "Choosing the hard path?" Tavish looked at her, his mate, his partner, the woman who'd run from her own ceremony and somehow ended up changing an entire system. "Not once," he said, "even when the council is being difficult? Especially then. Because the council being difficult means we're doing something that matters." She smiled, that fierce, bright smile that still made the bond sing. "I love you. Did I mention that?" "Not today." "I love you, for the record." "I love you too." Also for the record. They sat in comfortable silence, the bond humming between them, while outside the window the sun set over a territory that was learning, slowly, painfully, necessarily, that the old ways weren't the only ways. That choice mattered more than tradition. That truth built stronger foundations than convenience. That sometimes the greatest courage was standing in front of an assembly and saying no to everything expected, yes to everything real. Tavish reached for Lizette's hand, felt her fingers intertwine with his, felt the double heartbeat that had terrified him 6 months ago and now felt as natural as breathing. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For running, for fighting, for being stubborn and brilliant and brave enough to demand better. Thank you for being crazy enough to give it to me." They sat together as evening deepened, 2 people who'd broken every rule and built something new from the wreckage. And in the sacred grove, another couple walked away bonded, not by tradition, but by choice. Not because the system demanded it, but because they'd been brave enough to want it. The revolution, Tavish thought, wasn't in the grand gestures or the dramatic confrontations. It was in every small moment of honesty, every choice to prioritize truth over convenience, every person brave enough to say, "This doesn't work for me," and demand something better. He'd started this journey expecting to fulfill an obligation. He'd ended it with a partner, a purpose, and the beginning of real change. Not bad for an alpha who'd spent 3 days with the wrong woman and 10 minutes with the right one. "What are you smiling about?" Lizette asked. "Everything." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." She studied him for a moment, then laughed. "You're impossible. You're stubborn. We're perfect for each other." Terrifying thought. The best ones usually are. Outside, the last light faded from the sky, and somewhere in the territory someone else was probably making the brave choice, choosing honesty over expectation, partnership over possession, truth over tradition. It was a start, not the end of old problems, but the beginning of new solutions. And for 2 people who'd stumbled into each other through deception and found something real in the chaos, it was more than enough.